Okay, today is November the 23rd, 2010. My name is Tanya Finchum. I'm with Oklahoma State University Library, and we're conducting an oral history project featuring Centennial farm families in Oklahoma. And today we're in Stillwater at the public library to talk with the owners of the Thomas Bird Farm.
Beard.
Mm-hmm.
B-E-A-R-D.
To talk with the Thomas Beard Farm, right? Of Logan County. We have with us today Betty Bird Wall. Oh gosh, I'm gonna have to start over again. Betty Beard Wall. Cindy Wall-Morrison and Dean
Fuxa.
Thank you for coming today. And let's start by having Betty tell us a little bit about your childhood, where you were born, and then we'll move into the farm.
I was born in Wichita Falls, Texas, and my parents quickly moved to Oklahoma City, bought a house there, but because they were moving around a little bit before that, they were teaching in all different small towns in Oklahoma. They established their home in Wichita Falls. So while I was just a few months old, we bought a house and lived in Oklahoma City until I was in the second grade. And then the war came along, World War II, and my dad, of course, had to go to another town, and guess what? It was Wichita Falls. And so with my mother's family still there, we moved and lived there while my dad went to different Air Force bases. He was a civilian instructor, a little too old to fight at that time, which we were thrilled, but he did work in the war effort as an instructor, and lived there in Wichita Falls all the way through my high school. I went to Wichita Falls High School, and then, like a lot of other Wichita Falls people, we all go to Oklahoma University from there because of the oil companies, and there's so many fathers that graduated from OU, and our coach and a lot of the football players also went to OU with me, and so we lived in Norman all that time.
Okay, now let's back up. You are the granddaughter of.
I'm the granddaughter of Thomas B. Beard.
Okay, let's talk us through the generations. Then.
Okay. After my grandfather died, and he died in January 21, 1939, and had the funeral. Is buried in Marshall, and Dean helped me locate that, and when we were here a year ago. Then we, I guess it was quite a few years. They had the two sisters owned it, and my dad, which was Albert W. Beard. And he, right before he died, he bought the 1/3 portion that were left to the two sisters, because there were 3 children only. Thomas and Alice Beard had 3 children, 1 son, 2 daughters. And he bought the 2 daughters out. They were living a long way off, and just thought Dad should have it because he loved the farm, and he was the one that kind of kept up with it and always hired people to work it. He's the one that knew about the farm. So he bought them out, and he bought the last 1/3 one day before he died. It was real unusual. I sometimes think he was so excited about that, that they said, well, I've accomplished that, I've done that. That's what I wanted to do, is own that farm all to myself.
So he bought it from Aunt Bessie?
He bought it from Aunt Bessie and Aunt Molly.
Right.
The
But
two
that last
sisters.
third, was that
The
from
last third
Bessie?
was from the heirs of Molly. It had really gotten divided because she had 3 children, and he had to buy out each one of her children instead of her. But Aunt Bessie lived in Texas, and she owned the whole thing. So he bought her part, and then Aunt Bessie encouraged the children to go ahead and let Albert, my father, buy the other 1/3, so he would have it all. So he bought the last little bit. In fact, during his trying to settle his estate. It had been mailed, but it hadn't been, certified and all that kind of thing. So we had to go through that in the probate court and make sure that, everything was okay, that they had gotten their payment and all that. So he did have it all, just right before he died. Then I had been told a little bit about the farm. I was only 3 years old when my grandfather died. So I knew very little except what I remember or what Dad had told me in just passing, talking about it over the years. There are some little things I do remember, even 3. I can't believe that I can remember some of the little details about it, but I can get into those in a little while if you'd like to.
For sure.
You want to talk
Go
about
ahead
them?
while you're thinking about it.
I can remember going to the farm, and I was a little city girl, so of 3 years old, so I didn't know much about farms, and I was so intrigued with the barn, the animals, and one morning they let me go collect eggs from the chickens, which was quite a treat, and I loved doing all that. The only thing I remember that was really disturbing to my parents, because they were all farm people and knew how you do it on a farm, when they have a chicken and they want to eat it, what happens? Well, I didn't. And so instead of taking care of all that and just letting us take the chicken home, we took the real chicken home to Oklahoma City, to our house there. And of course, I had a pet chicken, and there was no way we were going to eat that chicken. So they had a hard time, because here we were in this wonderful neighborhood and this cluck, cluck, cluck going on all the time. And Mother kept saying, we're going to have to do something about that chicken. The neighbors are not going to like this. But they never let me know. All of a sudden our chicken disappeared and got lost. And I cried and cried. But I can definitely remember all that story. It was very traumatic to me that, I had this pet chicken that disappeared, but it was from the farm. One other memory I have is of a rocking chair that was my grandfather's. And they kept telling me as I was, it was in my parents' house, and now I have it in the guest room in my house. And it's a very valuable antique. They kept telling me, now be sure you keep this rocking chair, because it was made in Oklahoma, handmade, and it was coil type. It glides on coils, and it rocks. It is wonderful, most comfortable rocking chair you'll ever see. But it is, now you see a few of those coil types in baby. For babies, they'll have a glider kind of on coils. It's smoother. This is all oak wood, and it has the back, and it's on rollers. You can roll it, but it is, you can tell it was not professionally done, but it's very, very well done, and is quite a probably valuable antique. And I can remember my grandfather, rocking me in that, because I was still 2.5 to 3, and then I can remember going to the funeral when they were at the farmhouse, and my grandmother sitting in it. So those are some stories
I didn't know that was the history behind that rocker. I
Yeah.
knew it was a family heirloom.
My
but I didn't
dad,
know.
that was the one thing he had to have when they divided up the furniture, was that rocking chair, because it was a very important thing in the history of his life.
No idea how he came to have it, or
Yeah, the daughter said he needs it. He's
No,
the
but-
one that,
before that, though.
Like how the grandfather got it.
see the details that I missed. Because I was so young, and I was later baby. My mother was 45 when she had me. I'm the only child. So any stories that I heard were, not They were just kind of mentioned along the way. And these are just a few of the little memories I remember about the farm actually. I know there was a barn. The house at that time, Dean can tell you, it's been built onto now, and we do have pictures. Cindy took pictures of that house. But they had built onto it, I guess 2 times.
Yeah, you need to elaborate where it's at though, Dave.
Oh yeah, well you tell exactly where it's at, because you know I know what highway.
The house was one of the old kind of farm type houses that had the porch all the way around on all 4 sides of it, which probably, I think, I've been doing a little research, probably in the early 50s was moved 1.5 miles south and 1.5 miles back east and put on a farmstead there. And we just kind of happened on this when we started doing this research, that was Betty's old farmhouse that they had moved out there. We've been out there a couple of times. There's a family that lives in there now, farm family lives out there now. And they've just done some remodeling to add it. They didn't disturb the structure of the old house. They've actually kind of put an amendment to it. They've kind of added a large room kind of onto it, but it's still kind of the same basic farmhouse. They've done a little remodeling inside, but on the inside you can tell that it's just the old basic farmhouse that started out with when Betty remembers it on the farm.
And it had what I call Ricky Rack at the top of the porch, like, in the movies, Oklahoma and all it looked like that kind of house. It was quite a nice house for back in those days.
2-story or
1 story.
Well, no, it's kind of a story and a half.
Oh,
There's
can
kind
you
of
go
a
up
little-
there?
Yeah, there's kind of a little room in there on the top. The 2 little dormers come out, and there's
Yeah.
kind of a little. I don't think I've ever been in the top.
See, I've
story.
never been upstairs, but I thought those were fake dormers, but they,
No,
the
no,
attic.
there's a little stairway that goes up in.
I remember seeing the
Remember the
stairs,
stairway?
yeah.
So
Well,
how,
it's
so
a-
how many rooms would have been downstairs then? Probably the living room, kitchen?
There was a living room and a
Yeah,
kitchen,
those old houses were I think it was just four rooms at the time.
2 bedrooms,
Yeah,
and a
2
living
bedroom,
room and a
kitchen area.
kitchen area.
Indoor plumbing?
Yes, it is now.
And-
And
I
gas
did-
heating, I think.
Was
But
it
back
was it
then-
indoor plumbing when you was out on the farm?
Probably.
Yes, it
Oh,
was.
Was it?
I
That's
can remember visiting relatives in Garber that didn't, and that was my first time to experience that. Later, I did experience it a time or 2, but and that I don't ever remember that on the farm. But I do remember relatives that lived in Garber in the area. When we visited them, they had the outdoor facilities, and but the farm, that is something I don't remember. But I don't remember seeing it or, knowing about it. So, that's a question I'm not sure.
Well, let's back up a little bit. Do you know how your grandfather came to Oklahoma or how he ended up in
Yes,
Logan County?
yes, he married Alice R. McWhorter, and she was, I think, how they met, I'm not sure, but it's predicted they met and married in about 1880. And let's see, what was I getting to?
How they came to Oklahoma?
Oh, he was born in Missouri, came to Oklahoma to do the land runs, well, I understand it. And there was
The 1889 land run, the
yeah,
original one.
the original one. I did check with somebody from the area, and I asked them which land run, because they told me there was 2, and one later, and the original in '89. And they said, "Oh no, your grandfather did 89," and he, from what we can figure out, he came with 2 other brothers to do the land run from different areas. And he was born in Missouri, but he, there was a family, original family. Let me see if I can find all of that I have.
Did he meet Alice after
We
the land run?
We don't know exactly. No, he married her before.
Okay.
It was 1880s, and I would imagine they all came.
Gotcha.
To do, and had the 3 children on the farm area. They were all born in Marshall, which was the farm area. The brothers, a strange thing happened. I about 10 years ago, I got a letter from, and let me have that folder, the folder one. Right here, this folder from someone who said, I think we're kin to each other. And her name was Joyce, and how would you pronounce that? Sobrani, from Garber. And she said that her grandfather and my grandfather were kin. And she did a lot of research, and she sent some pictures of, the family. And there was a Samuel J. Beard, and the wife was Frances Bland, and they were from Tennessee and Kentucky, and they had 9 children. And her grandfather was Samuel Bryant Beard, and mine was Thomas B. Beard, and 2 of the brothers. And there was another brother that evidently the 3 of them came to make the land run from information she found. And she had decided that we were kin because of what she found. And so she's the one that did a lot of research. She was trying to go all the way back with the family to find out what country they came from, across the pond. And at that time, she had not done that. She was trying to find out a little bit more about her grandfather, and the family here. And that's when I found out a lot about when my grandfather was born, and then in Missouri, and then he died in Logan County, Marshall Township. And she evidently grew up, where I didn't, in the area in Garber. And so she said that Molly, Daddy's sister, and Bessie would visit her relatives, and they would tell what was happening with Thomas' family, And I did not know that she knew all about me. They talked about where I went to college, and she was 2 years younger. And she said that every time they would pass the farm, the Beard, Thomas Beard farm, that her mother would say, well, I wonder how Uncle Tom is doing today. So she said, I just assumed that we were kin to each other. And sure enough, when she did all this research going all the way back to 1822, we evidently are. So, the things happen kind of in a funny way. She went to Oklahoma State, and I went to OU, but she knew all about what I was doing in OU, and I never knew about her, but it was just family talking to her family. And I wish I had, because we didn't introduce ourselves to each other, only by email much later. So I'm going to call her to see if she's done more research all the way back, because that's kind of an interesting thing, how somebody is around here that is a distant relative, and I need to meet them in person instead of just by email and by letter. So she's the one that helped me a lot with the patent, the copies, and that you have on file. Now I had the old, what are those called, the certificates they sent, that the one that I tried to take a picture of for
Signed
you.
by
Yeah.
President Grover Cleveland.
Yeah, that they gave the land run people that when they, did all the paperwork and the patent that I made copies of there.
You have the original.
I have all the original of all that.
Well, when he first bought the farm, did he raise cattle, or do you know what kind of
I
farm he
do
might
know a
have?
little bit. He did raise cattle, and he had the chickens, of course.
Mhm.
And I remember where they got the water, they pumped the water, so maybe that tells us something about the plumbing, because I remember with the well, but the well could have been, we have a pond on there. Dean can talk about that helped, with the livestock. let's see, what else do I remember? They grew wheat and they grew all their vegetables and all that kind of thing. So they were pretty self-sufficient in everything they had there. So,
And once your father and then you took ownership, what's raised on it now?
okay, Dean?
Excuse me. It's still farming wheat and small grains and cattle is what we're still farming on the farm there. It was farmed after they got through farming it in the 50s. Jack Beebe rented the farm for a while.
He did.
Remember Jack?
I remember that now.
Jack's the one that his wife gave me Prairie City,
Oh, is that right?
from the,
Charlotte?
now what's the name of that, lady that was,
It's Angie
wrote
DeVoe.
those?
Yeah.
Sandy DeVoe.
Angie DeVoe. Miss DeVoe.
Angie DeVoe. And when Mrs. Beebe, we went by to see her one time, she said, you need this book, said I've gotten an autographed copy of this for you, and inside she wrote, I knew your family, they were part of this Oklahoma history, and signed her name to it. And it's an interesting book to read. And in there, you brought a copy, there's a picture, because my dad went to school, grade school, in the little tiny school. They have a picture of some children standing out in front. One of them looks just like my dad, about the age that my dad would have been. Then he used to tell me this, when he went to high school, went to Guthrie, and he rode the horse and buggy to go to school. He used to talk about, how hard that was and how easy it was, how the old days.
Yeah, I think I've heard the same
Yeah,
stories,
yeah. Yeah, it always gets a little easier than it was in the old days. But then they wanted him to go to Guthrie so he could go to college. And that's why they felt like he needed this education, in the bigger area to go on to the university school. So they were very.
Betty, did he go back and forth every day to school? Or
I
did
don't-
he stay over there?
I don't know.
The reason I ask is,
Yeah.
Guthrie's a 30
I know,
30-mile
I know,
trip
I know.
from where the farm is at.
I know.
And it's not like going in a
No.
car where it
Can
just
you
takes 30
imagine?
minutes.
Yeah.
In the cold weather.
So I don't know,
and,
maybe he stayed with
he
someone
may
during the
have,
week, you know?
how they all work together.
Mhm.
He may have done something for somebody, he could stay there part of the time, especially when the weather's bad,
Mhm.
because that's a long time to go back and forth every day. But that's where he went to high school. And it's somewhere in these records that I found that Joyce helped me with, I found that he went to high school in Guthrie, and that reaffirmed what he had told me. And then, of course, it didn't say where he went to college, but that he majored in history. See, this whole farm experience was really heavy on my dad. He loved history and he loved farming. But he never, because he got into teaching and coaching in schools in Oklahoma, he never did go back, but it was always there. I mean, he loved yard work. Everything he could do for us. We had vegetables in our alleys, if we had an alley, and he had in his, because he really loved that whole experience. And that's why I think the sisters wanted him to have the farm. They knew he loved it more than anybody else.
You were telling us what was happening in the 50s.
Oh, well, I think Jack started farming it in the 50s.
He started farming
Does that sound about right?
it before that. We moved, during the war to Wichita Falls, and I can remember them talking to him about, because he only farmed percentage. They did the percentage. So Dad was knee deep in how much was in wheat, and how much was, and they paid all the supplies and divided that up. So he took care of all of it, and he paid the sisters. See, he was kind of administrative, and he worked directly with Jack Beebe. So he knew just what he was doing. And so I think it was even earlier than that, because we moved right after the war, I'd say in 52 to Wichita Falls. And I can remember right after that, he was talking to Jack about, they'd already moved that they may not have moved the farmhouse yet, but it was in their way.
I think they did right about then, because just before then, when they moved the house.
Mhm,
Before.
So they had the whole land to cultivate because no one was living in the house. And it was too nice a house just to sit there. And so I think it was a little earlier, probably in the late 40s, middle 40s. And Jack Beebe was the first.
Jack farmed it probably until 1980, when his boy, Dwayne Beebe, started farming it. Remember Dwayne?
Mm-hmm.
And then I started farming it in about 95 to date, and I farmed it to date. So that's kind of in the history.
You know, there was one before him. I told you that. You mentioned his name. It was Adolf Wolf.
Vogel.
Vogelwolf.
Yeah, Vogel.
Somebody,
Yeah.
Wolf was
Yeah.
his last name.
Yeah.
And when I was very young, he may have done it for a year or two, and then
Before Jack?
Jack.
Yeah, I think that might be right, because I talked to Dwayne, and Dwayne was pretty sure that he thought it was 52 maybe is when.
Now, he may have
Jack
taken it over
from
and
Adolf.
right,
Yeah.
that's right.
That's probably correct.
So there have only been 3, and Dean is the 3rd. And he's been there as long as anybody, I guess, taking care of it. And I say, he knows it better than I do.
Is it still 160 acres?
It's still 160 acres. There's about 110 acres that's in cultivation, and there's another about 40 acres that's in pasture land. Where the homesteads set before, which you remember the homestead there was a barn, and then of course the chicken coop out behind there. And the water well is still there. We don't use the water well, but the windmill and water mill is still standing out by the corral.
Yeah, now I remember that. See, and that's when I
Remember
don't know if they got, we went out and looked at that, and I never seen that before. That whole thing was experience for me, and I guess I remember the dramatic things, being so young about those things. But, I remember that well, and the windmill, first windmill I ever saw.
So he's had to keep up with books and all of that for a long time, your father.
Oh, yeah, he did all of that. He loved it, and he knew it, and so they worked together. And then I guess I was the first one that decided to go with Jack Beebe to go to cash rent basis and just let them do it all, pay cash rent, and then they do all the bookkeeping and all.
And work.
And work, yeah, all
Don't
the
forget
work.
that.
All the work, yeah, right. But I was impressed with how well it's kept by Dean. The one surprise I had was when we drove up to it and he showed us all around, took us down to the pond and everything. There were these gorgeous longhorn steers out there. And I guess I'd never seen young ones that were so beautiful. And I thought, what in the world are those longhorns doing on this property? And I gave him a hard time, but I really thought they were so gorgeous, and I kind of expected to see them the next time we came. And I told the kids, you're going to see real longhorns, like the longhorns in Texas, and they weren't there. Dean didn't have them anymore, but I thought, I can't believe these Oklahoma people driving by here will let those longhorns stay on that property. It was kind of a funny thing for me. I just didn't expect it. But anyway, they are beautiful orange and white, deep burnt orange, just like they say it.
Well, how many ponds are on the 160 acres?
There's one pond.
Just one?
One pond, yeah.
Pretty good size.
Was it original or did soil conservation folks come in and
I
built it?
suppose they probably built it. Do you know for sure when it was? It was probably
It's way back.
way
I
back
remember
there.
them talking
They
about it.
built the pond.
There was an automatic place for it, and I think they just kind of worked it into a nice pond. And there's a tree down there. It's really, a good place for cattle to drink.
Any creeks or streams?
No, it's all pretty flat ground. There's kind of a stream that runs through that feeds this pond. That kind of runs through the field, but no, it's all pretty up flat ground. There's not any creeks or anything running through it.
Well, a lot of the early day folks would look for water. That's
Mhm.
why they picked the acreage that
Picked
they
this
did.
spot.
So.
Well, he picked that out, in that land run, evidently, because it is so well located. and it's just the way it is now. It's got the water on it, it's a beautiful piece of property.
Near what was the original capital.
Oh, yeah, well,
Yeah.
Cindy got involved in that. She was an anchor with Channel 8 in Oklahoma City, and she was.
Channel 5.
Oh, it was 5 in Oklahoma City, 8 in Tulsa. And she was Grand Marshal in Guthrie for their big parade celebration. And we heard all the history about the Capitol being stolen and taken to Oklahoma City. And it was a fun weekend to go to that celebration. Well, she got involved a little bit in that. So that was a fun weekend.
So how often do you get back to the farm? Now that not that you.
Not too
Once
long.
every 20 years.
We did go last holiday. Now it's not like I'm from England. Well, we were on holiday. But last Thanksgiving holiday or Christmas holiday, do you remember which one that was?
I think it's Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving. And we brought my kids. So it was neat taking, a picture with 3 generations standing on that land. It's really cool.
And Cindy has those pictures for you. She has the farmhouse and the sign at Dean's living room with 2 children holding their sign that we're putting up. We're signing the frame right now. And we're going to do that after we leave here. And then we have one picture standing outside by the road with the farm in the background with the 3 generations. So that's what that picture will be that Cindy's emailing to you.
So we have Thomas, and then he had 3 children.
Yeah,
One of them was your father,
Mm-hmm.
and your father had 1 child, you,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have 1.
Child also. See, it's making it easy, isn't it?
Mhm.
Now it gets more difficult with her too.
And then you have 2. Okay, that's usually the next question is, what do you see for the next 100 years?
Yeah, we talked about that, and I had Dean written down for that. One thing, as far as the family part, I've inherited property from my dad because they did live and always kept every house they ever bought. So I inherited those, and I had 2 houses in Oklahoma City, had a house in Enid that they got that, never lived there. We never lived there, but they all, everybody in 29 had money in the bank that they didn't get back. And so the bank in Enid, because of money they had, they gave them the house in Enid. They had property they had on mortgages. And so if people had money in the bank, they would try to give them, if they had quite a bit, they'd give them the house, but that's all they got. So they got a house in Enid, which I inherited, and 2 houses in Oklahoma City, house in Wichita Falls, and then ended up, my dad lived in Lubbock a short time. So I ran all these, and one in Norman. He lived in Norman with us for a little while we were in graduate school. So in dealing with all that, I have gradually sold some because I managed them all and leased them all. And it was quite hard from Lubbock, Texas, because all of them were 350 on up miles away. So I would sell 1 a year until I got them all sold, except what we have in Lubbock that's easier to handle. And I said, now you can, I put that money safe and you can spend that, but you have to promise not to sell the farm. So Cindy's promised, and we're going to start working on her children so it stays in the family. That's what we're planning for the next 100 years. Now, Dean can tell you what he sees otherwise.
Well, and I just want to say, my kids know that stays in the family. So
You have boys, girls, 1?
a little boy and a little girl.
Not so little.
Yeah.
Not so
8 and 11 now.
I don't know if we ever told the location. The farm from 51 and 74 is 1.5 miles north on the east side of the road, right off Highway 74. So it's on an excellent location, being right on a major state highway up there. And I suppose we'll go ahead and keep farming it like it is, as long as it's profitable to stay farming. I was going to ask you something. You said you had the house, and I'm learning things here myself.
Yeah, we're both learning.
in Lubbock, is that the house that your dad lived in?
Mhm.
Oh, it is? Oh.
Yeah, we bought a house, well, we finally pried him out of Norman. He did not want to leave. Dick graduated PhD clinical psychologist from OU, and he had to go out and try his wings somewhere without all his friends and teachers and things. So he goes to Lubbock, Texas, to Texas Tech to help them get the clinical training program approved, because he was an approved. They didn't have anyone. They had clinical psychologist in two of them, but they needed one in a certified program like OU's program in order to get their certification to start graduating clinical psychology. So they worked on him a long time, and we cried, and Daddy cried because we bought him a house 2 blocks away, and Cindy was a baby, and he loved to stay with her, and it was a traumatic experience to leave and go way out there. And
She's still trying to make me feel guilty about it.
40 plus years
oh,
later.
listen, it was hard. I was going to keep the house because I knew he wouldn't like it out there, because he's from Idabel, Oklahoma, with trees and water, and there's no trees and no water unless you plant them. So, you know, I knew he wouldn't like it very long, and with the dust storms and things. Well, 44 years are still out there. And it's partly my fault because I got acquainted and got established, and I'd say, oh, let's stay 1 more year.
I'm trying to get them to move back to Oklahoma. So, but you don't live in Grandpa's original house.
No,
Yeah.
we bought a house about 2 blocks away so he could walk over and see Cindy all the time. But trying him out of Norman and his Sooners was really difficult. We just almost had to sell his house out from under him, and we did move him literally. So to get him to leave Oklahoma. But, you know, it's that house we did sell early on, and we still own our house.
So your father had a master's degree?
Master's degree in history, education, and all that from OU. And the Professor Dale, he used to talk about all the time. He's the one, they have the building, you know, with his name. Oh, he just loved him and spent all his time trying to soak up everything about Oklahoma history and any other kind of history he could find. So, yeah, he talked about him all the time. So,
Out of all the grandparents, he's the one that I have the most fond memories of.
because she spent time.
Because I spent a lot of time over there, and I remember he had this music box that was an OU football that you could open, and it played Boomer Sooner. And I can remember he or I, one or the other, would go wind it up and play it. He also had a silver foil Christmas tree
Yes, he did.
that turned around and had blue and green lights on it. And he just, for years after he died, and they can tell you this, I mean, anytime I'd watch a movie or a TV show and they would beat up on an elderly man, I would just hysterically cry, because
He was a very
Neat man.
kind person. He was very easygoing, low maintenance, just, you know.
Unlike Mother.
Oh, yeah, I'm totally different.
Not when they beat up on old men, dear
He was very, very well liked. And something interesting about him was that they taught in Mulhall. I mean, they would rail off these Oklahoma towns that I see signs of. I've never been there. Well, they taught in all these, and they met that way. My mother and Dad did. And Dad coached girls basketball. And of course, girls basketball back then, you know, weren't many places, but Oklahoma had girls basketball teams. They could only play half court. They didn't think they could play full court.
They were just women, right?
Yeah, they were just girls. They couldn't do all this. And he loved sports because he coached, you know. But I thought it was interesting he coached girls basketball.
And this would have been when?
Oh, it was in the 20s, late 20s. And I don't think girls basketball was very big except Oklahoma. It evidently was in some of these little towns. And they had them, but they were small teams and they played half court. So I think that's kind of an interesting sidelight. But that's why he didn't go back to the farm. He married a school teacher. He was teaching. that's kind of what they were doing, and so it just didn't call to go back to the farm to work it.
But he didn't get rid of it.
He sure didn't. He stayed knee deep in it as much as he could.
And he encouraged education for you.
Mm-hmm.
Did you attend OU as
I
well?
did. Mm-hmm. I did, and
Midwestern for,
huh?
you went to Midwestern for a year.
Oh, I got a master's also of education at Midwestern because Dick was graduating the Navy program from OU, and of course they had to go immediately as a midshipman. They had to go in. They got their ensign stuff, and he was an ensign in the U.S. Navy, and he reported to a ship in California and called me and said our wedding's going to have to be put off because I am leaving for 7 months on my ship. So I didn't want to go ahead and get married and sit out there and know no one. So I was 2 blocks away in Wichita Falls from Midwestern. It's called Midwestern University now. And so I just got a master's in education so I could make more money when I did go to California to teach. And Oklahoma to teach. Of course, I didn't make very much in Oklahoma back then. I dropped $2,000 from the same job from California, but it costs a whole lot more to live there. So it equaled out. We lived just as well in Oklahoma. So
when did you graduate?
graduated from high school in Wichita Falls High School in 54 and OU in 58.
Now, I'm assuming you went to OU.
I did, third generation of my family to go to OU, and I graduated in 89. 1989. Since we've been talking about 1889.
I know, every once in a while I forget when I say, I mean to say 19, I'll say 18 because I'm thinking 18 so much here.
You mentioned Angie Debo a minute ago. Did you meet her?
No, I did not. They just got the book for us, and
She's very famous.
oh, yeah,
What is the book that y'all are talking about?
it's Prairie Village, and I have a Prairie City.
Prairie
Prairie
City.
City is what it's called. And
Yeah,
I
talk-
have,
You have not shared this with me, so I don't know anything about it.
No, I know. I'll have to let you read that.
Okay.
Angie rode in on the run in a wagon. She probably knows.
Oh, really?
From our-
Really?
Yeah,
See, I don't
and they
know
settled
why.
there in Marshall, and the book is about all the towns that are settled right there. That's why they call it, Marshall used to be called Prairie City.
Huh.
So that's why she got it. She wrote several books.
Yeah.
I think she's,
Well,
there's only
well
3
known
people in the
story.
Oklahoma State Capitol Rotunda, and she's, Sequoia, Will Rogers, and her, I think, are the only 3
was the
people that are
first one.
pictured in the,
Oh,
Very
wow.
and she went to OU. She
I
was a
did not
historian.
know-
Yeah,
see,
yeah,
I
she
did
was a
not know
historian
that.
at OU, and she did a lot of things. I knew her. She was in, she was our,
Mm-hmm.
she'd come down to school, to the Marshall School, and sometimes instruct us a little bit, and we knew Angie quite well. She was quite a
Quite a
What a
character,
person.
because more people have talked to me about her, and
Quite famous.
Mrs. Beebe just said, you have to have this book. So she got it autographed for me and everything. I thought it was just really nice of her to do that.
I think she studied under Dr. Dale too. So
See,
there's another
there's the
connection.
connection. There's
Dale Hall, is that the same
That's,
as Dr.
yeah,
Dale?
oh yeah, it's the
Okay.
one they built, the new big one. It's right on Lindsay there.
Yeah, I've spent many a
Well,
semester
see,
in
that
there.
wasn't there when I went to school. They had one, but I took history there, but I didn't, it wasn't like that. It's a gorgeous new building there.
I wish I had known more about the word Marshall and because
Oh.
y'all always told me how it was outside of Guthrie.
Uh-huh.
And my daughter's name is Marlo Ryan. And we have relatives that are buried in Ryan.
Yeah, my mother's.
Yeah, mother's side of the family. And I might have worked Marshall into Peyton's
Yeah.
name somewhere had I known that. Yeah,
Yeah, it's kind of
it's a great
interesting.
name.
So I'm trying to think of any other interesting things I can think of, the farm that I can remember. And I don't know if there's any things in little notes as I was reading through here. This is all her stuff there.
Where are they buried? Where's
Okay, Dean helped me with that. You tell me what cemetery that was.
Actually, there's 2 Marshall cemeteries, and that cemetery that she's referring to is called the North Cemetery. And it's just 2 miles out of Marshall to the
And that's
north.
where Thomas and
That's where
Alice.
Thomas
And Alice.
and Alice are both born. Now where's your mom and dad buried?
They're in Bryan, Oh, my mom and dad, Wichita Falls.
Wichita Falls.
And my mother's family's all in Ryan,
They-
Oklahoma.
They just bought their plots, and I made them buy in Norman. She was.
I wasn't ever thinking of Norman. And we lived there, during
I
school.
said,
and
we'll be going
breakfast.
to football games. We'll
She
come
said
visit you.
she
No matter
wants-
where we live in the country, we'll come
she-
visit you.
When she said, well, we want you as part of our life. And I thought, well, now how do you answer that? So I guess I better think close to where they're gonna be. And the only place we know for sure that they're gonna return at times would be Norman. Go back to school to visit or to, reunions or see football games. And so we did it this trip.
Not to take a tranquilizer before all these trips, so it was so
Yeah,
exciting.
he was so excited, we're gonna rush up there to look at cemetery plots. But I think it kind of sold him when they said Toby Keith was
Me
gonna
and Toby will get along okay.
Yeah, Toby Keith is gonna be buried here. He said, oh, he was more interested then.
But I would love for them to move back to Oklahoma. They do have a lake house at Grand and are here 2 weeks during Thanksgiving and 2 weeks during Christmas and usually a week or two during the summer. But I would love for them to,
Day after we win the lottery, we're back.
but I would love for them to live here.
I'm sure Thomas would approve too. that
Oh,
you did it
yes.
back in-
Definitely, right, that's right. And let me glance at these just a minute, see if there was something else I found that was interesting, because we covered a lot of it. Talked about the porches, and I think they heated, it's asked if they heated, how they heated it, I think it was by wood, the fireplaces back then.
Was there a cellar? Do you know?
I don't remember a cellar being there. There probably was. There wasn't too many homesteads that didn't have a cellar provided on there, but I don't know if on the farm where it would have been.
I'm amazed seeing the house now, what good shape it's in. I mean, you think about a house being built way back then, and I know we have a lot of, old homes throughout the United States, but a farmhouse that's getting all the weather elements and everything else, and a little while people weren't living there. I mean, it's just so well built. It's amazing.
And how they moved in, I would love to watch.
Yeah.
Well, it is a very nice house. I was amazed it lasted that long to look that good.
Mhm.
So, it asks on these questions about how they built it. Well, I got to thinking about that, and he didn't have the money to have a builder come in and build it, so he had to build it himself. And I have a feeling they all helped each other, in what they could do to build their houses back then.
Sort of like what you think of the Amish, building a
Yeah,
house, helping
yeah.
each other.
So, because it is a beautiful place for a farmhouse, it's just what you'd want, just the pictures that you'd want, and you'll see it when you see the pictures. It's in a little while, Cindy can just show you what you're going to get on your email, and it's quite a lovely picture of a house even after all this time.
Well,
Alright.
farming sure has changed in 100 years, so
Yes.
all from mules to combines and such.
I can pull up these
Pictures, and if they're bigger, of course, you wouldn't be able to get them on that, but trying to see if there's anything else, talked about, see, I had
Do you have help doing the farm work, or is it just you?
Oh, we've got a little bit of summertime. I have some young boys help me, but mostly just a family farm. I've got a father just passed away here about a month ago,
Oh,
but him and my brother, we kind of stayed on the farm out there. Actually, I was born just a half a mile south and a mile back west from Betty's farm.
Here's the
see how
farmhouse.
pretty it
In
is,
the
even to
door.
this day, it's just a beautiful place. Typical farmhouse.
Makes you want to have Thanksgiving there.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, and then the pictures of,
These are the two hold down, take a minute to download.
okay, I thought of something else, now we got off the topic.
Here are my kids with the Centennial Farm sign. And then here are
That's what Dean has in
3
his living room
generations.
for a year.
Here are 3 generations out on the farm.
Yeah, you mentioned that you'd like to have that, and I said, oh, we've already done that. We did that last year.
Parts of it were flat, but there were parts, probably the
Well,
pond
it
and
goes,
the
it
trees
kinda
and.
goes up a little bit in the back. The back is a little higher than the front, isn't it? It seems like it anyway. And wind was
Yeah, that's
blowing,
fun.
Oklahoma wind, you can tell. We're blown to bits out there, but it's right on the highway, so it's easy to find, easy to see. And I've got my camera, I can take other pictures if you'd like, because we're going that way. We've got to design the frame that holds and where it's gonna go.
When you actually hang it, take another photo.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
So back in the day, they would have taken things to market, would have been Marshall or
Marshall,
Gateway?
yeah,
Marshall.
no, Marshall probably would have been of our local market.
And today, where do you
Well, Marshall is becoming kind of
go?
a ghost town. We still got an elevator there. We still Holler Wheat still goes to Marshall. And they've got the post office and the elevator is about all that's left in Marshall.
Cattle and take it to Oklahoma City then?
Normally, or Covington has a livestock auction, which is only 14 miles up the road.
Where'd your longhorn steers go?
yeah, I know it, that's what I wanted to know, like, where are they? I've told the kids
Actually-
they're here.
Actually, we had a longhorn bull and some heifers out there, and I was breeding this longhorn bull to some heifers out there. And
It
so
was
there
a
was,
good-looking animal.
Oh, gosh, they
yeah,
were,
they had, remember the big old?
oh, they were
Yeah,
just
rack.
like you would
I
think.
bet it
I
was
mean,
probably 9 foot of
Oh.
tip to tip a horn out.
I know it, I said, can I get out of the car? That thing looks big. Yeah, I now know. I see them at the Texas OU game, you know, when they drag that big old thing in, but it wasn't as pretty as these. And I wasn't as close either.
Anything else you want to add before we sign off?
Well, I think you've covered a lot of this and the things I knew. And I was amazed that not being that old when, you know, the source died, my grandfather, that I could, come up with as much as I could. Of course, Dean helped a lot. because he-
Dean has been a huge
Yeah.
help.
And this might be something, you didn't realize this stuff till Betty kind of went to researching this. We've all kind of went back and found some things that we find it might be interesting for everybody to kind of go back and do a little research now, while a lot of people are still here that can,
Oh, yeah.
that can help you with that. There's nothing written down, everything's just word of mouth. You have to find someone that's lived in the area and knows the people, and so maybe something like this would be very advantageous for
so.
people to kind of document some of these things, and maybe spur some other people on to document some of the history of the local area around here.
Yeah, I'm gonna call Joyce again and see what she's found out. And she talked about doing this for her farm, and she hadn't done it. And I said, well, we have done the Centennial work and got it approved. And she said, well, I need to do that. So I don't know what she's done about it. But
Did they go to church very much, do you know?
they went to the Christian church. The 2 daughters married 2 Christian ministers. Does that tell you anything?
So it was like First Christian Church.
First Christian church.
In Marshall?
Uh-huh. And in that book, they talk about an outstanding preacher that is from Disciples of Christ, which is Christian church, that was in the area. And it must have really made a difference in their religions in that area.
Do you know if it's still there?
Actually, the Christian church is still there. They've just closed it here in the last year, and they had a nice building, and they gave the building to the community, and now the Christian church is our community center.
Oh,
Ah,
okay. Well,
neat.
that's a
Right there
good
on Main
way.
Street. But
Okay.
Marshall had several churches. There was a Catholic church, there's a little Gospel Lighthouse Church, there was an E&R church, there was a Methodist church, there was several churches in the little town of Marshall. There's 1, 2, 3 of them are still open, and 2 of them have been closed.
Well, the thing I was intrigued, it did mention some other ministers, but it talked about this one that was really very liked. And I must have been why they all went to that area, because all of them were like two people marrying a preacher, of the same church. And then Dad, I thought we could not go to any other denomination. Dick and I were married in the Christian church. Mother was a Methodist, but she said there is no way he can be happy in the Methodist church. He can only be happy in the Christian.
Well, two things I wanted to mention. Dean has gone above and beyond the call of duty because
Certainly has.
somebody who's working land is not generally going to go do research and give us all this rich history back. So I think that's
Oh, he's
thank
wonderful.
you for doing that for our family and for Oklahoma. I think that's really special. And there was one other thing I was going to say.
I
it
know.
left me,
While
but
you're
thank
thinking
you
about
to
it,
you.
While you're thinking about it, one question I always had, and I've asked a lot of people in the area, I asked Dean, was he a boomer or a sooner? And I didn't ask that. See, if my dad was alive, I could have checked on that. And I had a farmer in the area that I talked to one day that called me. And I guess they're all researching and they knew that we'd done this. And I asked him, and he said, well, and you may know this too, being from the area, that the 89er line was about 1.5 miles from our farm. And that if he had been a Sooner, slipped over the night before, that he would have gotten caught. So he said, I'm sure he was one that went when the gun shot. So that's all I know. It's a big
a
mystery.
role player. I like that.
Yeah, it's a big mystery, but he said he was too close to the line to be able to get by with.
Must have had a pretty fast horse.
He must have, because I think he got one of the best pieces of land anywhere around. And Dean's always told me it's one of his favorites, so to work.
You have more than one.
Yeah, we farm quite a bit
Yeah, his dad, he owns and he does others besides mine, I guess. But he has quite a big.
Total acreage then that you farm, not necessarily own, but farm.
there. Well, yeah, we farm I own 320 acres. Just from Betty's farm, I own a farm that's actually 2.5 miles south, right on Highway 74 also, so we're kind of neighbors.
We're neighbors.
pretty close.
We're neighbors.
And we farm about 2,000 acres probably.
Can you believe that?
And I
That's work.
remember what the second thing is. I wanted to thank you for doing this project. I can remember when I was in elementary school and we went to stay with my dad's mom. My dad's dad had already passed away, and part of our school curriculum was we had to get on cassette tapes, which, before long I'll have to transfer that over. We don't have anything to play it on. But I had to get all the history of our family as part of this project. And I loved that because I felt like I learned more about my heritage and proud of where my family came from. And so now it's awesome to put the other half of that piece together from what you guys started. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful program.
It's fun, so thank you all for coming today.
Well, you are welcome. You're welcome. We enjoyed it.